to it to retire with. If you worry so much about the credit score, it forces you into this panic situation that says, I can never be 30 days late on a credit card payment, I can never miss a mortgage payment, I can't possibly let my house go to foreclosure, I couldn't consider bankruptcy. What I'm saying is the tools of financial crisis management are foreclosure, short sale, bankruptcy sometimes, debt settlement with your credit card companies. The decision that people have to make, and they have to make it carefully, is it worth the trade-off? Is it a smarter trade-off to take a hit on my credit short term for a couple years for the benefit of getting rid of debt so that I can accumulate my future earnings?
Well, let me ask you that question, Ken, and that is, I do a lot of cases in divorces where we're doing short sales or we're doing contemplation of bankruptcy or trying to do workouts because of the fact that so many assets, homes, businesses, 401ks, are either upside down or have very little equity. Had a client call me. She's thinking about going through bankruptcy. She's got a lease right now. She wants to lower her payments. The lease is in her husband's name. She was told if she goes bankrupt, her credit will be hurt so badly that the payments that she could make now at a very low interest will be impacted for many years, and she'll have to pay a much higher rate of interest after the bankruptcy.
You mean on a car lease? Or
on a car lease. And that would be true on, you know, credit cards or other types of financial transactions.
You have to put it in perspective. Let's say that same person has $70,000 worth of credit card debt, and their monthly payments on those credit cards are running them $2,200, $2,300 a month, which wouldn't be an uncommon situation for people. If they got rid of the credit card debt, took a hit on their credit score, and as a result, when they went to buy another car and finance the car, they're going to pay a premium interest rate of a couple points higher on an interest rate. Instead of a 7-8% car loan, you're going to pay a 9-10% car loan. Your payment's going to bump up maybe $100, $150 per month on that car. But if you've saved $2,000 a month on paying off and you're not paying off the credit card debt any longer because it's gone, it's a much better situation. Project that $1,900 difference per month over the next 20 years, and you've got a tremendous amount of money. So what people have to really think about is, and my justification of it is this, is if you've sustained the loss in the asset values through no fault of your own. I've got clients that, they were conservative people that bought rental homes, real estate to buy, rental homes in Arizona, Florida, to gain the appreciation on the home. They were reasonably solid investments. They were in resort communities that they could lease them out. And then all of a sudden this crash hits and there are no tenants in those homes anymore. No. And the mortgage payments are $3,000, $3,300 a month and climbing because they're all on variable rates of interest. And you're totally getting buried by them. If you take all of your wealth that you've accumulated and use it to just pay off those debts, you have nothing at the end.
That's correct.
That's a harder situation. There's a lot of people they've already lost the wealth because the wealth was in the difference between the market value of the home. The homes were worth $800,000, the mortgage was $500,000. That was $300,000 of wealth, and if you had 2-3 homes, you had close to $1 million of equity. That equity's already gone because the homes aren't even worth the mortgages.
On paper. Ken, we've reached a break point. We're going to be right back with my guest, Ken Gross, and dealing with the economy under these dire financial times.
Things can get pretty ugly when you're bored. In an after-school program, you can find something way better to do.
We're back with my guest, Ken Gross, and issues in our economic meltdown. Ken, during the break we were talking about the fact that, people with money want to invest. The question is, where do you invest and what is safe, if anything?
Safe is a tough word nowadays because we grew up with an understanding that real estate was the best and safest investment ever, and it's turned out to be the biggest disaster, you know, since the Great Depression. I still, if you said to me, home ownership, investing in Florida, investing in Arizona, those markets are going to come back. Investing when it comes to in Michigan, there are opportunities out there. There are investment groups that are coming together. They're buying homes for rent in you know, Birmingham, Royal Oak, Ferndale, those communities where there's a lot of good buys. It's a solid rental market where you can make a return. The problem of buying right now is having access to the capital in order to finance it. Conventional financing is very difficult. You almost have to raise that money through private equity.
What about the fact, credit cards? I mean, credit's kite, but I'm still getting solicitations every day in the mail for credit cards, and you know, I've heard that there are a lot of abuses by the credit card companies. I was told that, you know, like for example, a lot of credit cards are offering, well, frequent flyer miles, for example, like that. But if you're a vendor, you're paying a lot more for those cards. And the question, are there any regulations in this area?
There are. Probably nothing boils my blood faster than the credit card industry. But in Memorial Day, there was legislation passed, sponsored by the Obama administration, that goes into effect in February of next year. And that was to limit the ability of credit card companies to bump interest rates unless you're 60 days behind, stop soliciting college students and minors for credit cards unless they have independent income to support it, and a number of other abuses that were curtailed that got into that legislation that was pretty good legislation considering the abuses. When I started the Financial Crisis Talk Center as a radio show, the very first thing that I said on that show was, if I loan you money, Henry, and it's on a verbal loan, the most I can charge you interest is 5%. If I put it in writing, I can charge you 7%. Beyond that, it's usury, and if I charge you over 24%, it's criminal. So I asked the question, how is it that Bank of America can be charging people 33% interest on their credit card and get away with it?
What's the answer?
The answer is the banking lobby was able to exempt all banking issues to a federal level to override all state law. So there is no state usury laws that govern or limit the amount of interest that can be charged through the banking industry. But you have to step back and say, why did they have usury laws? Usury laws go back to a policy statement that said we don't want loan sharks out there. And they made a policy statement back years ago that said anything over 24% is akin to being a loan shark. So what we have a banking industry that is basically loan sharking the American public.
Except what about pawn shops? They are regulated by law and they can charge 3% per month, which is 36% annually.
Kind of a consignment thing in a different segment of state law, fulfilling a different need. I mean, the abuses there probably are outrageous as well, but it's kind of also probably in some respects grandfathered back in because pawn shops have been around from the beginning of time as well. But when you look at the credit card industry, and which is one of the areas where they're suffering big losses right now because people are basically wisening up as to what's out there. Right now, in the last year, we've seen most of the credit card companies do the following thing. They've taken people that have never missed a payment, never been late, have honored their terms of their credit cards perfectly throughout the entire amount of their history. They've had their available credit slashed by the credit card companies because the credit card companies are taking losses from their other customers, and all of a sudden banks tightened up and they got scared and they said, we have all this exposure to liability of all these credit lines out there, so we're just going to cut them. That happened back at the beginning of this year, and it's still going on right now. Worse than that is the new law that that was passed in May. They gave them a grace period till February of 2010 to put that law in effect. Ostensibly, the reason is that they needed time to make IT and technology changes to their systems in order to make sure they could comply with the new law. So what do? In that 9-month window, they said, wow, we don't want to be stuck with this thing where we can't raise interest rates unless someone's 60 days behind. So they've now sent notices out to virtually